Dr. Williams, I love Michael, but my mother insists I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. How can I love someone when I'm constantly told they're not good enough? Kelly sat on the couch, her hands tightly gripping the edge of the cushion. Her face was a mixture of frustration and exhaustion, as if she had replayed this conversation in her head 1,000 times before saying it aloud. She wasn't always like this. When Michael and I first started dating, my mom seemed to like him. She even invited him over for Sunday dinners and would laugh at his jokes. But then, little comments started slipping in. At first, they were subtle, like, "Oh, Michael is sweet, but I thought you wanted someone with bigger goals," or, "You've always had such sophisticated taste, does Michael really share that?" Kelly paused, her voice catching. I brushed it off because I thought, that's just how my mom is. She's always been a little critical. But over time, it got worse. She'd find a way to compare him to someone else, a friend's boyfriend, someone at work, anyone who fit her mold of what my partner should be. It's like she was planting seeds of doubt and waiting for them to grow. I could see the pain in Kelly's eyes as she recounted the slow unraveling of her confidence in her own choices. It was a story I had heard before, though every version was unique in its details. I tried to ignore it. I love Michael. He's thoughtful, hardworking, and he makes me laugh like no one else. But her voice, it's always there in the back of my mind. Whenever we argue, I hear her words, questioning if he's really the one for me. It's exhausting, Dr. Williams. How do I get her voice out of my head? I leaned forward slightly, letting a moment of silence settle before responding. Kelly, it sounds like you've been carrying not just your own concerns, but your mother's expectations as well. That's a heavy burden to bear in any relationship. What do you think it would take to trust your own voice again? She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the carpet. I don't know. I think I need to believe in Michael the way I used to, without her opinions clouding everything. But even if I try to block it out, her words come back. And it's not just her. Michael's family, they're starting to add to the chaos. Her voice faltered, but she continued. His sister, Sarah, keeps making these comments about me. She thinks I'm too focused on my career, that I don't care enough about starting a family. At first, I thought she was just curious, but now I realize she's judging me. Every family dinner turns into an interrogation about why we don't have plans for kids yet, why I work so many hours. And Michael, he just sits there, caught in the middle. The room felt heavy with the weight of Kelly's frustration and hurt. I gently asked, "Have you and Michael talked about how this is affecting you both?" She nodded slowly. "We have, but it's complicated. He loves his family, and he doesn't want to upset them. And I love my mom, even though she's driving me crazy. I just don't know how to balance it all without losing myself, or him." As Kelly's words lingered in the air, I couldn't help but feel the rawness of her struggle. Many couples face challenges like these, where external voices threaten to drown out the ones that truly matter. I reassured her that this was a challenge, but not an insurmountable one. What about you? Have you ever felt caught between your own instincts and someone else's expectations? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, feel free to share in the comments. Michael entered the room with a nervous energy, his gaze darting briefly toward Kelly before settling on me. He sat beside her, his hands resting awkwardly on his lap, as though unsure of how to hold them. "I guess I'll just start," he began. "This isn't easy for me, talking about this stuff. But it feels like we're stuck between two walls, and every time we try to move forward, those walls just close in tighter." Kelly glanced at him, her expression softening for the first time since the session began. "I know my family can be, a lot. Sarah has strong opinions about everything, and she's never been afraid to share them. But lately, it's like she's fixated on Kelly. She's always bringing up how career-focused Kelly is, as if that's some kind of flaw. I hate it. I hate that she makes Kelly feel judged, but I also hate that I don't know how to stop it without creating an even bigger problem. Kelly shifted in her seat. Do you really hate it? Because sometimes it feels like you just let it happen. I sit there while your sister picks me apart, and you stay silent. It's like you're agreeing with her, even if you don't say it out loud. Michael's face tightened. That's not fair. Do you know how hard it is to be in the middle? I love you, but I also love my family. If I speak up, it's just going to turn into a huge fight, and then what? We'll have even more problems to deal with. Kelly's voice rose, tinged with frustration. So the solution is to let her keep disrespecting me? To let your family think it's okay to question every decision we make as a couple? You don't even realize how much it's affecting us. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. And what about your mom? Do you think it's easy for me to sit there while she finds new ways to make me feel like I'm not good enough for you? It's like no matter what I do, I'm always going to fall short in her eyes. The room fell into a tense silence. They both looked at each other, their expressions a mix of hurt and exhaustion. I waited a moment before speaking. It sounds like you're both feeling attacked and unsupported, not just by the people around you, but by each other. You're on the same side in this relationship, but right now, it doesn't feel that way, does it? Michael shook his head. No. It doesn't. I love Kelly, but it feels like everything's pulling us apart, and I don't know how to fix it. Kelly's voice softened. I feel the same way. I miss how we used to be before all this noise. It's like we've forgotten how to just be us. Then let's start there, I suggested. If we strip away the outside voices, who are Kelly and Michael? What brought you together in the first place, and what keeps you fighting for this relationship now? Michael looked at Kelly, his eyes softening. I remember the first time we met, at that charity event. You were running around, making sure everything was perfect, and I couldn't stop watching you. You were so passionate, so determined. I thought, this is the kind of person I want to build a life with. That hasn't changed. Kelly's eyes welled up. I remember that night too. You made me laugh when I was so stressed I thought I might cry. You have this way of grounding me, of reminding me what's really important. That hasn't changed either. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension in the room slowly giving way to something softer, more hopeful. I offered a small smile. That's the foundation of your relationship. It's still there, even if it's been buried under other people's opinions. Now it's about protecting that foundation, together. Have you thought about what boundaries you might need to set with your families to make that happen? Michael nodded. I think we need to start being more direct. If Sarah makes another comment, calmly but firmly. And maybe we need to stop sharing so much about our plans until we're ready. Kelly added, I need to do the same with my mom. I've let her opinions affect me for too long, and that's not fair to Michael or to us. I think I just need to remind her that I'm an adult, and this is my life to live. They looked at each other, a tentative understanding beginning to form. Michael leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly as though releasing the weight he had carried for weeks. Kelly glanced at him, her expression cautious but tender. We talked about it after last session, Michael began. And we realized how much we've been letting everyone else's voices drown out ours. It's like, we forgot that this is our life to build, not theirs. Kelly nodded. I've always thought I was strong, you know. Independent. But when my mom kept criticizing Michael, I started to question myself. I thought, what if she's right? What if I'm too close to see it? I didn't realize how much power I was giving her words. Michael looked at her, his voice softer now. And I let my family's opinions get to me too. I should have defended you, Kelly. I should have told Sarah to back off a long time ago, but I didn't want to stir the pot. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace, but all it did was make things worse between us. Kelly reached for his hand, and he took it without hesitation. I know. And I've been guilty of the same thing. I didn't tell my mom to stop because, well, she's my mom. It felt like I owed her that space to share her thoughts, even when they were hurtful. But I see now that I was protecting her feelings more than I was protecting ours. The room grew quiet, the kind of silence that carries an unspoken understanding. For the first time since we began, I could sense their connection coming back into focus. Michael broke the stillness. We decided to set some boundaries. With my family, I'm going to make it clear that Kelly and I make decisions together, and they don't get a say. If Sarah makes another comment about Kelly's priorities, I'll call her out. Respectfully, but firmly. Kelly squeezed his hand. And I told my mom the same thing. I called her a few nights ago and said, "Mom, I love you, but I can't keep listening to these comments about Michael. I'm happy with him, and I need you to support us, not tear us down." She didn't take it well at first, she got defensive, of course, but I stood my ground. I think she's starting to understand. Michael smiled, a faint glimmer of relief in his eyes. That's more than I've managed with Sarah so far. I tried to bring it up last week, and she just laughed it off, like I was overreacting. But I'll try again. This time, I won't back down. Kelly turned to him. We'll do it together. If Sarah pushes back, I'll speak up too. It's not just your responsibility to shield me, it's ours to stand up for each other. I nodded, watching as their commitment to one another grew stronger in real time. It's not easy to set boundaries, especially with family. There will be resistance, even pushback, because change can feel uncomfortable for everyone involved. But by being consistent and united, you're showing them that your relationship is a priority. And over time, they'll either learn to respect it or they won't, but you'll have protected your foundation, and that's what matters most. Kelly's eyes brightened. That's what we're learning, I think. That we have to choose each other, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Michael's voice was steady now, his confidence growing. We're learning to be a team again. To focus on us, not on everyone else. And honestly, it feels freeing. Their connection was palpable now, the cracks in their relationship beginning to heal as they reinforced it with mutual understanding and respect. Kelly leaned forward, her hands gesturing as she spoke, the energy between her and Michael feeling lighter now. We had a small breakthrough over the weekend. It wasn't anything dramatic, but it felt important. We were at your parents' house, remember? She glanced at Michael, who nodded. Sarah made another comment, something about how I'll probably make Michael do all the parenting since I'm so career-driven. Usually, I'd just sit there, biting my tongue and stewing over it later. But this time, I looked her in the eye and said, "Sarah, I really appreciate how much you care about family, but Michael and I make these decisions together, and we don't need advice on something so personal." Michael smiled. And you should have seen Sarah's face. She didn't know what to say. For the first time, I think she realized you weren't going to just take it anymore. Kelly shrugged. It wasn't about shutting her down. It was about showing her that this is our life. I was nervous, though. I kept thinking, what if this makes things worse? But the weird thing is, the rest of the evening was peaceful. It's like setting that boundary shifted something. Michael leaned back, his expression thoughtful. I felt the same way. And it made me realize I've been so afraid of rocking the boat that I've let it drift wherever everyone else wanted it to go. But this is our boat. We decide where it goes. Kelly laughed. Our boat? That's quite the metaphor. He grinned. Well, it works. The point is, standing together feels better than tiptoeing around everyone else's opinions. I finally feel like we're steering again. I watched their dynamic carefully, noting how their shared experiences were reinforcing their bond. You're learning to prioritize your relationship in a way that's both respectful to others and protective of your connection. That balance is hard to find, but you're doing it. Michael nodded. I guess what surprised me most was how easy it was once we started. I mean, it's not perfect. Sarah will probably make another comment eventually, and your mom will have her moments. But knowing we're in it together makes it feel manageable. Kelly's voice softened. That's what I've been trying to hold on to. That this isn't about fixing anyone else, it's about making sure we're strong enough to handle whatever comes our way. Michael reached for her hand, his touch gentle but deliberate. And we are. Their progress was evident. The tension that had once filled the room was now replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense of unity that hadn't been there before. Kelly smiled as she adjusted her position on the couch, her voice calmer now, almost reflective. We've started doing these little check-ins with each other. They aren't anything formal, just moments where we ask, are we okay? Or, how are we feeling about everything? It's made a huge difference. Before, I think we just assumed the other person was fine or that there wasn't time to talk about it. But now, it feels like we're really listening. Michael nodded, his expression serious but warm. It's not just about listening. It's about showing up, you know. There's this thing I've started saying to myself when things get overwhelming, I choose Kelly. I think about that every time Sarah or anyone else makes a comment. It reminds me that this is my life, and you're the person I'm building it with. Everything else is just noise. Kelly reached over and placed a hand on his knee. You don't know how much that means to me. For so long, I felt like I was fighting this battle alone, like I had to prove to everyone that we were worth it. But now I realize that the only person I need to feel that from is you. Michael met her gaze, his voice soft. And I feel the same way. I let my family's opinions get in my head, but at the end of the day, none of that matters if we're not solid. I don't want to lose what we have. I leaned forward slightly, watching as their connection deepened with every word. It sounds like you're not just setting boundaries with your families but also reinforcing the boundaries within your relationship. Those check-ins, that intentional focus on each other, are ways of protecting what you've built together. That kind of awareness will serve you well as you continue to grow as a couple. Kelly nodded. It's funny. I thought boundaries were about shutting people out, but now I see they're about letting the right things in. And that starts with us being honest about what we need from each other. Michael smiled. Like that night when we stayed up until 2 a.m. just talking. No TV, no distractions, just us. It felt like we were back at the beginning again, when we first started dating and couldn't get enough of each other. I'd forgotten how good it feels to reconnect like that. Kelly laughed softly. I think I'd forgotten too. But now that we're making the time, it feels so much easier to deal with everything else. My mom hasn't completely stopped her comments, but I'm better at shutting them down without it eating at me. And Sarah, well, she's still Sarah, but I don't take her words as personally anymore. Michael leaned back, his shoulders visibly more relaxed. We can't control what other people do, but we can control how we respond. That's what I keep reminding myself. And as long as we're good, I know we'll figure the rest out. I let their words settle, the room filled with a sense of quiet resolution. They had come a long way from where they started, and their journey was a testament to what could happen when two people chose to fight for each other, even in the face of external pressures. If you're listening to this and wondering if it's possible to find your way back to your partner, know that it starts with a simple choice, to put each other first. Have you had to make that choice? How did it change your relationship? I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences, feel free to share.